You're lying in a bed that creaks when you breathe. The room is quiet, too quiet, but your thoughts aren't. They echo. The walls may not whisper back, but your body does. In aches. In fatigue. In the questions that sneak in when the lights are off and no one else is around. Where is God in all of this? It's a question that hurts even to ask. You feel guilty thinking it. Like faith should make you stronger. Like you should already know the answer. But here you are, searching the ceiling like it might write something back, something clear, something simple. You're not alone in that question. Not now, not ever. Centuries ago, in a small infirmary tucked behind the great walls of a Benedictine monastery, a sick friar once scribbled into the margins of his prayer book, "Today I said the Rosary with no words. Just breath and shaking. I hope that counts." Historians still argue whether that note was ever meant for anyone else to read. But one thing is clear, it was real. Honest. Broken. And deeply holy. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're watching this from a hospital bed, a couch you haven't left in days, or simply a place where you feel invisible, comment below. Tell us where you are and what you're going through. Not because it fixes anything, but because being heard helps. I hope that through my sharing, you will gain a clearer understanding of your own situation or that of your loved ones, along with ways to overcome the challenges you may be facing. I wish you success, happiness, and peace. Now back to the bed that creaks. Pain is strange. It shrinks the world. It turns time into molasses and makes the corners of the room feel farther away than they are. You notice things you never used to. The sound of a ticking clock becomes a metronome of discomfort. You resent it. You rely on it. Sometimes both at once. And somewhere in that swirl of breath, fatigue, and stubborn heartbeat, a thought floats in. Should I pray? You hesitate, not because you don't believe, but because you don't know what to say anymore. The prayers you knew by heart now feel like riddles. The Our Father sounds too formal. The Hail Mary too far away. And besides, what do you even ask for at this point? You've prayed for healing. You've begged for energy. You've whispered for relief. And the pain is still here. So you stop. But then, your fingers move. Almost without thinking, they find your rosary. Not out of discipline. Not out of duty. Out of desperation. Your thumb runs over the first bead. Just one. And for now, one is enough. Because that bead doesn't demand the right words. It doesn't ask for eloquence or posture or proof of your holiness. It just sits in your palm, steady, cool, unjudging. You inhale. You exhale. You hold the bead like it's holding you. And slowly, barely, a whisper begins. Not a mighty declaration. Not a polished prayer. Just a sound that says, I'm still here. You are still here. And that matters more than you think. You're not praying because you feel powerful. You're praying because you feel powerless. And ironically, that's often where the most powerful prayers begin. In hospital rooms. On bathroom floors. In early morning quiet. In long night terrors. In the weak voice of someone who thinks maybe God forgot to check in today. But here's the twist, He didn't. You think God stands at the door of healing, waiting to open it if you knock hard enough. But more often than not, he's already inside. Sitting. Waiting. Not for you to be strong, just for you to reach out. You don't have to prove anything. You don't have to pretend to feel faithful when you don't. You just have to show up, with a single bead in your hand and breath in your lungs. That counts. That's enough. And sometimes, God chooses to whisper back right then. Sometimes, He doesn't. But He always stays. You are not the first person to ask, "Where is God when I hurt?" And you won't be the last. But your asking is not weakness. It's the start of a holy conversation. So when you lie in that bed and the ceiling still says nothing, remember this. The silence isn't empty. It's occupied. The bed isn't alone. It's shared. And your pain? It's not ignored. It's witnessed. By the one who still heals, sometimes through medicine, sometimes through miracles, but often through presence. Quiet, faithful, aching alongside you presence. And sometimes, that's the healing you didn't even know you needed. Your hand moves from one bead to the next, not because you feel stronger, but because something in you says, keep going. It's strange how the Rosary works that way. You don't have to think ahead. You don't have to plan. Just one bead. One breath. One whisper of hope at a time. You've probably noticed by now that pain rewires everything. It changes the way you sit. The way you speak. The way you see. You used to notice the blue in the sky, now you notice the ache in your joints. You used to walk quickly, now you measure the distance from your bed to the sink like it's a marathon. And still, you're holding that next bead. Here's something you've never said out loud: you're tired of praying for healing. Not because you've lost faith, but because you're afraid of disappointment. You're afraid of hoping. Again. Just to be let down. Again. But here's the thing God wants you to know. He's not disappointed in your hesitation. He sees the way you glance at your rosary like it's both a comfort and a challenge. He sees the sigh before the first Hail Mary. He sees the way your body slumps after every "Pray for us sinners." And He doesn't back away. He leans closer. Remember this, you don't pray to remind God of your pain, you pray to remind your pain of God. Somewhere between the second and third decade, you forget what you were going to ask for. And somehow, that's okay. Because now, the prayer isn't about the words. It's about the rhythm. The movement. The sacred repetition that slowly opens your clenched hands. That's when it happens. A shift. Not in your body. Not in the diagnosis. But in the room. You feel less alone. No bright light. No thunderous voice. Just the sense that someone is sitting beside you. Not rushing to fix you. Not disappointed in your tears. Just there. Like a friend who pulls up a chair in the waiting room and says nothing, because nothing needs to be said. That's what healing looks like sometimes. And you know what's wild? That truth shows up in history, too. Back in the 14th century, a woman named Julian of Norwich fell seriously ill. Nearly died. Everyone thought she was gone. But instead, she had visions, visions that would later become some of the most comforting reflections in Christian thought. She wrote, "All shall be well, and all shall be well. And all manner of things shall be well. Historians still argue whether her visions were mystical or the product of high fever, but the words stuck. Not because they cured her, but because they held her. The way your rosary holds you now. Maybe you're not here for answers. Maybe you're just here for company. Good. Because God doesn't always come to explain. Sometimes he just comes to be. Think about this. When Jesus healed the sick, he didn't always do it the same way. Sometimes with a word. Sometimes with a touch. Sometimes with mud and spit. But before the healing, there was always one common thread: presence. He stopped. He saw. He sat. So if you feel forgotten in your suffering, if you've started to believe the lie that you're too broken, too far gone, too burdensome, remember this. God sits beside the sick. He doesn't just visit. He dwells. He's not offended by your groans. He's not uncomfortable with your questions. He doesn't need you to sound holy, he just wants you to keep holding the beads. Because with every Hail Mary, you're not just calling out to her. You're joining her. The one who stood at the foot of the cross. The one who watched her son suffer and did not run. The one who knows what pain feels like when healing hasn't come yet. And she's praying with you. Think about that. You're not alone on your pillow. You're not alone in your pain. You're surrounded by saints, by angels, by a mother who understands, by a God who stays. So as you move to the next bead, remember, even if your body still hurts, your soul is already softening. Even if the diagnosis remains, the despair doesn't have to. Healing doesn't always mean walking out of the hospital. Sometimes it means being able to sleep in peace while still inside it. And that peace? It begins with prayer. Even if all you can whisper is, "Be with me." He is. He always was. You didn't expect prayer to feel like this. Not like a miracle. Not like a wave of joy. More like a soft chair after standing too long. Like warm water on cold hands. A quiet yes, not from heaven, but from deep inside your ribcage. You sit still now. Letting the beads fall through your fingers like slow rain. There's something about this gentle rhythm, that steadies you. Not because it changes your pain, but because it reminds you you're not disappearing inside it. Funny, isn't it? You used to think healing would arrive with trumpets and headlines. But instead, it's arriving in the smallness. In the presence. In the space between Hail Marys where your soul finally sighs. You recall something a nurse once said, when she brought you tea and tucked your blanket tighter than necessary. You don't need to talk today. You just need to be held. That's how God speaks, too. Some people think prayer is only for the strong. For the spiritually mature. For those with eloquent words and unwavering trust. But you're learning that some of the holiest prayers are made up entirely of sighs and silence. Even Mary's presence in the Rosary is like that. She doesn't interrupt. She doesn't perform. She listens. She lingers. She understands. Because she watched her son suffer. And not just on the cross. In the waiting. In the misunderstanding. In the rejection. And yes, in the physical agony. She stood there. She stayed. So she knows how to sit beside you now. Without needing to explain a thing. You begin to realize. Your prayer doesn't have to fix anything, it just has to connect you. To her. To him. To the truth that you're not invisible. It's tempting to measure healing by how much pain is left. But tonight, healing looks like the courage to feel loved while you're still hurting. Back in 17th century Spain, there's a little-known account of a nun who suffered from a mysterious illness that left her bedridden for over 20 years. She couldn't preach, couldn't work, couldn't even lift her arms some days, but she prayed. Quietly. Daily. With her rosary tucked beneath the blankets. And people began to visit her not because she was cured, but because they felt peace in the room where she lay. Historians still argue whether that peace came from her prayers or their own softened hearts in her presence. But either way, healing happened. Not to her body. To others. Through her surrender. Maybe that's you now. Maybe the healing won't come to you, but through you, to someone else. A nurse who watches you endure with grace. A visitor who walks in heavy and leaves lighter. A stranger who stumbles across your prayer tonight and hears you whisper, "Be with me," and realizes they can say it too. See? You're already a vessel. Already a light. Already part of something divine. That's why God sits beside the sick. Not just to comfort them, but to shine through them. To say to the world, even here, I remain. You run your thumb along another bead. Hail Mary. You breathe in. You breathe out. And for a moment, you forget to measure your symptoms. Because peace has pushed to the front of the line. You realize something. You don't just want to be healed, you want to be held. And in this prayer, you are. So let the rosary keep flowing. Let the beads drop one by one like holy rain. And when you pause, don't panic. The silence between each prayer is where God often speaks the loudest. He's not waiting for you to be cured before he comes close. He's not afraid of your pain. He's not leaving when the pain lingers. He's here. Still. Soft. Sure. And sitting right beside you. You open your eyes and realize you've been still for a while now. Not frozen in fear or fatigue, just still. A different kind of still. The kind that doesn't come from exhaustion, but from presence. From knowing you don't have to carry this alone anymore. You've been praying for healing. For comfort. For answers. But now? You're just praying to stay in this nearness a little longer. Because something sacred is happening, and it's not happening to your body, it's happening to your soul. That's when you remember, God doesn't wait outside the room of the sick. He pulls up a chair. It's a truth we often miss. Because we're conditioned to look for God in progress. In improvement. In recovery. But He is just as present in the places that haven't changed. And maybe that's why the rosary feels so healing. It doesn't demand speed. It doesn't measure your holiness by your volume. It just moves gently forward, as if to say, I'm here. I'm still here. I'm not going anywhere. You roll the next bead between your fingers. Hail Mary, full of grace. And you don't say the rest out loud. Not because you don't know it. But because the silence between words feels more honest right now. You let the rhythm carry you like a boat on a soft tide. You think about all the times someone said, I'm praying for you. And you weren't sure what that meant. But now you know, sometimes it means holding space. Holding sorrow. Holding you. Did you know that in early Christian monasteries, some monks were assigned to do nothing but sit with the sick and pray silently beside them? Not to offer cures, not to counsel, just to be there, present, breathing, holding the silence open so the sick didn't have to bear it alone. Historians still debate whether that practice had any measurable benefit on healing. But the monks believed it did. And honestly, that's all that mattered. So tonight, you feel like one of those monks, sitting with your own suffering, not trying to fix it, just choosing not to run from it. Because healing doesn't always begin with an answer, it begins with presence that refuses to leave. Let's be honest. The world teaches you to escape pain, to numb it, to hide it. But the Rosary doesn't do that. It walks straight into the ache and says, let's stay here together. Even Jesus, before healing Lazarus, wept. He didn't fast forward through the grief. He joined it, sat in it, let it matter. And maybe that's the model of divine healing we forget the most. It's not always in the miracle. Sometimes, it's in the companionship. So as you hold the next bead, don't rush. You're not behind. You're not doing it wrong. You're exactly where you need to be. If all you did today was whisper, "Be with me," and believe for a moment that He was, that was enough. And it still is. There's a strange holiness in these quiet hours. When the world is asleep and your pain is awake. When no one texts, no one checks in, and yet somehow, you are more seen than ever. That's what it means when we say God sits beside the sick. He doesn't barge in. He doesn't force cheer. He comes like breath, like nightfall, like a lullaby for the soul that's too tired to sing. And here's the thing about divine presence, it changes the room before it changes your circumstance. The pain may still be there, but you are no longer alone in it. So keep holding the beads. Keep whispering the names. Keep trusting the silence. Because the one who heals, He's already here. And He's not leaving. You've lost count of how many beads you've passed now. But that doesn't matter. You're not praying to meet a quota. You're praying to stay afloat. To stay connected. To stay close. And tonight, the Rosary is less like a prayer and more like a lifeline. You feel it, how the beads guide you through the fog. Not out of it, necessarily, but through it. Like a hand reaching backward in the darkness and quietly whispering, "Come this way." That's what healing looks like sometimes. Not the sudden end of pain, but the first sign that you're no longer lost inside it. You remember hearing once that people who are physically blind often develop heightened senses in other areas. Touch, hearing, memory. The soul works in a similar way. When illness clouds one part of your life, another part of you begins to listen more deeply, especially in prayer. You start to hear things you didn't before. Your own breathing. The sacred rhythm of the Rosary. Even the hum of your heart, tired but steady. Hail Mary, full of grace. The words come softer now. But not because you're growing weaker, because you're finally letting go of the need to try so hard. And that's healing, too. There's a little-known story from 5th century North Africa about a woman who used to lead communal rosary in her village every day, even after she lost her voice from illness. She'd mouth the words, lips moving slowly, and somehow the others around her felt their prayers were stronger when hers were silent. Historians still argue if this was reverence or just legend. But it doesn't matter. The point isn't volume. The point is presence. Just like yours right now. You don't need to raise your voice for God to hear you. You don't need to feel holy to be held. You don't even need to finish the Rosary perfectly. You just need to keep reaching forward, one bead at a time. Because these beads, they don't only carry your prayers. They carry you. Your body may be tired. Your diagnosis may be unclear. Your questions may go unanswered. But your prayer? It never returns empty. Even when you don't feel it. Even when your faith flickers like a dying candle, even when all you have is the instinct to pick up the next bead and say, "Pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death." You're participating in something eternal. And if that doesn't sound like healing, you haven't been sick long enough. Because healing isn't just about less pain. It's about more peace. More surrender. More sense that even if your body doesn't feel better, your soul does. You shift slightly under your blanket. A dull ache in your side reminds you of the realness of all this. And yet, you also notice your breathing is calmer. Your mind quieter. The war inside your thoughts less noisy than before. Could it be that prayer has already changed the room? Even if the pain hasn't left your body? Yes. Absolutely yes. Because sometimes, God doesn't remove the storm, He sits with you in the boat. He doesn't always silence the pain, but He reminds you it's not the loudest voice anymore. That space now belongs to grace. And grace, like the Rosary, knows how to linger. So here's your job. Don't hurry. Don't finish. Don't strive. Just stay. Stay in the moment where healing doesn't require proof, only presence. Stay in the prayer that doesn't ask you to be strong, only honest. And stay with the beads that were never meant to be magic, but have always been meant to lead you back to Him. He is near. You are seen. The healing has begun. The next bead feels different, not in texture, but in timing. You pause before it. Not because you're unsure, but because you're aware. Aware that something has shifted. Not dramatically. Not visibly. But undeniably. It's the moment in the Rosary where prayer stops feeling like effort and starts feeling like companionship. You're not reciting anymore. You're abiding. The line between you and God is no longer a question, it's a thread. Gentle. Steady. Still holding, even in the weight of your silence. And that silence? It's become sacred now. You once feared silence in prayer, didn't you? It felt like failure. Like God wasn't listening, or worse, wasn't speaking. But now, here in this fragile quiet, you understand something ancient. When nothing is said, something is still happening. It's the mystery of healing. Of presence. Of love that doesn't need noise to be real. St. John of the Cross once called it the dark night of the soul, a space where even the most devoted felt abandoned, but where God was, in fact, closer than breath. Historians still argue whether his suffering was mystical or psychological, but no one denies the truth of his words, silence is God's first language. So you keep praying. Slowly. Lightly. Hail Mary. Grace. Now. Hour of death. The words don't feel heavy now. They feel like a blanket being drawn over the soul. A comfort not from distraction, but from deliberate presence. The kind of presence that says, I see you. I'm not rushing you. I'm not embarrassed by your pain. I'm not waiting for you to get over it. I'm staying. That's the voice of God beside the sick. Not a shouting miracle. A whisper of mercy. You wonder, if I never healed physically, would this still be worth it? The answer surfaces quietly. Yes. Because the healing you're receiving is not just in the bones. It's in the bitterness being replaced by peace. It's in the loneliness that has softened into a holy hush. It's in the part of you that believed you were forgotten, now slowly coming back to life. You're remembering something. That you are more than your symptoms. More than your charts. More than the doctor's uncertainty. More than what the mirror refuses to reveal. You are a soul in the hands of a God who never left the bedside. Let's be honest, you wanted the pain gone. You still do. But something in you knows that what you're receiving now might be even more essential. Because this kind of peace doesn't come in a prescription bottle. It doesn't arrive in a test result. It shows up when prayer outlasts the noise, and you realize God never needed words to be present. Even now, in this quiet room, under this dim light. In a body that still hurts. You are being held. Not fixed. Not forgotten. Held. You shift the beads again, and it feels less like discipline, more like communion. A divine rhythm. Pain. Pause. Prayer. Presence. And somewhere in the mystery, your spirit stretches again. Not to escape the moment, but to live inside it more honestly. You remember that Jesus, even on the cross, didn't cry out for healing, he cried out for presence. And the Father was there. So now, you do the same. Not asking to be spared, but to be seen and not alone. And you are. That's the miracle tonight. That's the healing most never notice. But once you felt it, you never pray the same again. You shift your weight again, carefully. As if the bed might forget you're there if you're too still. The ache is familiar now, less sharp, more settled into the rhythm of things. It's strange how the body adapts to pain. Stranger still how the soul learns to pray inside of it. You're still holding the rosary. Still whispering. Still waiting. But it no longer feels like waiting for something to happen. It feels like waiting with someone. Because that's what prayer becomes, when you stay with it long enough. It stops being a lifeline for rescue and starts becoming a companionship in the storm. You glance at the crucifix at the end of the beads. It doesn't startle you anymore. Doesn't feel so distant. Instead, it feels familiar. Like a face you've passed 1,000 times in silence and only now truly looked at. You remember someone once said, the cross doesn't remove our pain, it joins us inside it. That's what these beads have done. They haven't taken away the discomfort. They've reminded you that you're not the only one who has sat in it. And somehow, that's more powerful than you expected. Have you noticed how you're breathing differently? Slower. Softer. More like someone who trusts the process. That's what healing often begins with, not relief, but readiness. Readiness to be held. Readiness to be changed, even if the circumstances aren't. There's a story, quiet, rarely told, of Saint Bernadette. Yes, the one from Lourdes. The girl of visions. She spent much of her adult life sick. ill-forgotten by most of the world. And yet, when asked what her suffering taught her, she whispered, "Jesus is enough for me." Historians still argue whether those were her final words or simply ones recorded during her illness. But those who heard them say she said it not with triumph, but with peace. Not shouting. Not performing. Just surrendering. That's what you're doing now. Not giving up. But giving in, to the idea that maybe healing isn't something you chase down. It's something you welcome. You're no longer afraid of being still. You're no longer panicked when the pain rises. You're no longer convinced that silence means abandonment. Because God doesn't show up loudly for the sick. He shows up faithfully. Sometimes as strength. Sometimes as peace. Sometimes as a nurse with warm hands. Sometimes as the silence between two beads. You're learning to recognize Him in all of it. And maybe that's the real miracle tonight. You haven't left this room. You haven't stood up. You haven't even finished the full rosary. But somehow, the atmosphere has changed. Not outside. Inside you. Your hope is no longer conditional. It's no longer, if I heal, then I'll believe. Now it's, even if I don't heal, I still believe. That shift? That's sacred. And you didn't earn it. You didn't force it. You simply showed up. One bead at a time. One breath at a time. One ache at a time. And slowly, the pain stopped being a wall. It became a doorway. A way back into your spirit. A way back into trust. A way back into prayer that doesn't demand an answer, only a presence. So keep going. The next bead is waiting. Not because God needs it. Because you do. And in this holy slowness, you are becoming more than someone who suffers. You are becoming someone who rests in God. Even while the suffering remains. And that, right there, is the shape of real healing. You used to think the rosary was for the strong. For the disciplined. For the ones who woke up early and lit candles and didn't forget which mystery came next. But now? Now you see it's for the hurting. For the unsure. For the trembling hands at midnight who just need something to hold. And here you are. Holding it still. You haven't finished. You're not sure where you are in the decades. And it doesn't matter. Because what matters isn't the precision. It's the presence. One bead. One breath. One whisper. That's all heaven needs to enter a room. You pause again, body aching, eyes heavy, and it hits you. This is the most still you've felt in days. Not numb. Not checked out. But deeply here. You remember your grandmother, maybe. Or a neighbor. Someone older who kept their rosary beside their bed. You always thought it was just routine. Tradition. Habit. But maybe it wasn't. Maybe it was their medicine. Their anchor. The one thing that didn't ask them to explain anything. Just to show up. Sit still, and remember they were never alone. There's an old legend about a soldier in World War I who carried a broken rosary, missing half its beads. People told him to get a new one. But he refused. Said, "It still leads me to the same God." Historians still argue whether the story was ever true. But believers remember it anyway, not for its accuracy, but for its honesty. Because when you're in pain, perfect prayer isn't what heals you. Presence is. And you're not alone in that. Not now. Not ever. Look around. The room is still dim. The body's still tired. But something's glowing now, and it's not the lamp. It's the peace that slipped in while you were too focused on surrender to notice. The peace that never asks you to smile or pretend. The peace that doesn't promise a cure, but sits beside you like a friend who doesn't flinch. This is what prayer becomes over time. Not something you do, but someone you sit with. That someone is God. And He's not far. He's not behind schedule. He's not silent because He's ignoring you. He's silent because sometimes, healing comes through listening, not talking. You've been asking, why doesn't He answer me? But now you understand. He has. He answered when your breathing slowed. When your panic softened. When your hand stopped gripping the sheets and started holding the beads. Sometimes, the miracle isn't a new scan or a clear result. Sometimes, the miracle is that you didn't give up. That you're still here. Still praying. Still trusting. Still whispering, even when no one else hears it but heaven. And guess what? Heaven hears it. Your rosary might feel like a small act. But it's enough to move mountains of fear. Mountains of loneliness. Mountains of despair. You're not cured. But you're comforted. And that's not less than healing. That is healing. So tonight, as you lean into the next mystery, as your hand trembles over the next bead, know this. You are not reciting. You are not stalling. You are being held. Every Hail Mary tonight is a hand on your back saying, you're not going through this alone. And when you forget that, just return to the next bead. Because that's what the rosary is. Not a magic spell, but a lifeline of presence, wrapped around the hand of someone who thought they'd been forgotten. You are not forgotten. You are not too far gone. You are right here. And so is God. Still sitting. Still healing. Still whispering your name. In a room that now feels a little more like sanctuary. And a little less like suffering. You barely notice the shift in time. The air around you is still cool, still quiet, but something feels different. It's not that the pain is gone, but that it no longer owns the entire room. There's a kind of peace now that wasn't here before. A gentleness, not just from God, but from you to yourself. The rosary has softened something. Not just your breathing or your thoughts, but your expectations. You used to come to prayer like a transaction. God, I'll say this. You fix that. But now? Now it feels more like a conversation, slow and sacred. Without pressure or performance. You're not rushing through the mysteries, you're living inside them. Because mystery is what suffering is made of, isn't it? You don't know why your body broke down when it did. You don't know why answers take so long. You don't know why prayers sometimes echo longer than you'd like. But you do know this. God didn't leave. And that is enough for tonight. You hold another bead and think, I'm still praying. I'm still here. God is still listening. There's power in that repetition. It's the same rhythm that carried wounded soldiers through battlefields. That carried monks through plagues. That carried mothers through miscarriages and old men through loneliness. Historians still argue about how the rosary evolved, who made it formal, who gave it structure, who made the mysteries official. But the people who needed it most never cared about structure. They just needed something to hold when they had nothing left. Like you. You hear the word healing and still think it should mean something visible, measurable. But now you understand it's also this. The loosening of fear. The acceptance of help. The courage to ask God to sit beside you, not fix you. Because when God sits beside the sick, He doesn't always come with a cure. Sometimes He just brings Himself. And that's all He needs to bring. You blink slowly now. Not from exhaustion, but from settling. Into presence. Into peace. You realize something, you've stopped bracing yourself. You're not clenching against the pain. You're not tensing in the silence. You're not wondering whether prayer is working. You've simply begun to trust it. This is the strange beauty of the Rosary, it works quietly. While you pray, while you rest, while you sleep. It lays grace like soft cloth over your most wounded places. You don't feel it all at once, but in the morning, you'll know something has changed. The ache may still be there. But it's not in charge anymore. You know who is. The one who sat beside you all night. The one who whispered back between your whispered Hail Marys. The one who saw every tear. Even the ones you didn't let fall. You feel something rise now. Not energy. Not joy. But confidence. A quiet knowing. That if the healing never comes in the form you expected, you'll still be whole in ways that matter more. You shift your hand to the final few beads. Not because you're finished, but because you're ready. Ready to move forward, not in perfect strength, but in holy dependence. And if your body is still fragile, that's okay. If the diagnosis doesn't change tomorrow, that's okay. Because you've changed. You are no longer praying for healing as something far off. You are now praying within healing that has already begun. That changes everything. So say the next Hail Mary slowly. Not to complete a ritual, but to continue resting in the truth. That you are seen. You are loved. And you are not suffering alone. The Rosary didn't rescue you from this moment. It redeemed it. And that's what real healing always does. The final bead rests against your palm. It doesn't feel like an ending, more like a pause. A sacred comma in a sentence that never really stops. You know now, prayer is less about finishing and more about abiding. And the Rosary has taught you how to do just that. You breathe in, then out. No drama. No urgency. Just presence. That's the rhythm now. Not frantic pleading. Not desperate asking. But a calm trust that God is here, and has been the entire time. You reflect on how far you've come. Not in distance, but in posture. You began clutching the beads like a lifeline. Now you're resting in them like a pillow. The Rosary has become your room's still center, the quiet heartbeat of your soul when everything else feels loud. This is what healing becomes. Not always a miracle, but a shift in how you carry the pain. No longer with fear, but with faith. You remember the woman in the Gospel who touched the hem of Jesus' cloak. She didn't cry out. Didn't make a scene. She just reached forward, tired, desperate, unseen, and believed that if she could just get close enough, healing would find her. She was right. Historians still argue whether her act was culturally scandalous or simply courageous. But the result was the same. Jesus felt her touch. He stopped. He turned. He called her, "Daughter." That's what the Rosary does. It brings you close enough to touch the hem of mercy. And when you do, God doesn't rush past. He turns. He stays. He says, "I see you. Even now. Especially now." You move your fingers one last time along the crucifix, not with desperation but with gratitude. You've remembered something the world keeps trying to make you forget. That your worth isn't in your strength. It's in your belonging. And you belong to a God who sits with the sick, walks with the weary, weeps with the wounded, and heals without hurry. You lie back on your pillow now, not to give up, but to give in. Into rest. Into peace. Into the kind of healing that doesn't ask for proof, only permission. You close your eyes. Not because you're escaping, but because you're safe. The pain may still hum in the corners of your body, but it no longer defines you. Now you are defined by prayer. By presence. By peace. So let the world keep spinning. Let the diagnosis remain uncertain. Let the unanswered questions wait their turn. Tonight, you have touched the hem of God. And He has not pulled away. He has drawn nearer. And you? You are healing. Even now. Especially now. Let this final breath be your amen. Stay right where you are. Don't move. Don't reach for your phone. Just breathe. Let the stillness settle over you like soft rain. The Rosary is done, but the presence remains. You've opened something inside yourself tonight. Not with a shout, but with a whisper. Not with force, but with surrender. And now, your soul is quieter. Deeper. Calmer. Let that calm carry you. Let your thoughts drift without grasping. Let your worries float without attaching. Let God keep sitting there, at your bedside, at your side, at your center. Healing isn't always instant. But it begins exactly like this. In the pause. In the softness. In the sacred exhale that says, "I don't have to hold it all." So release the pressure. Release the outcome. Release yourself from having to know how this ends. Tonight is not about endings. It's about resting in the arms of the one who heals without haste. Who loves without condition. Who stays without question. Let the silence finish what your words could not. Let the beads keep whispering long after your lips grow still. And if your eyes begin to close, know that this, too, is prayer. Good night, child of God. You are not alone. You are not forgotten. You are not beyond healing. You are exactly where you need to be. Held. Loved. Healing.